Chiefs got to get back on the road to getting to domination. Can they do it? What does this Denver game tell us? Who played, who didn't, who needs to step up their game today on Locked On Chiefs?
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Welcome back. It is a Tuesday show here on Locked On Chiefs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're brought to you by SimpliSafe. For home security, it's the fast, effective technology exclusively from SimpliSafe, 24/7 monitoring and all. Over at, when you get there, go to simplisafe.com/LockedOnNFL to learn all about it. I'd like to learn about security in terms of getting the output this team wants to get to. I'm Ryan Tracy, the founder of Rogue Analytics and Performance Consulting, as well as NFL33.com and RGR Football.
And I'm Chris Clark. Thank you for listening. We have a lot to talk about before we move on to the Texans game, which we'll talk about a little bit later this week. But there is a lot to talk about this Broncos game and the way it played out for this Chiefs team. Even though they moved to 10-3, which is obviously what you wanted to happen, it did not happen the way that you would want it to.
No, and I think there's probably a lot of people at One Arrow Drive today that are reeling from the fact that you played once again like a couple of times last year, your first half, right up until that first interception. So the majority of the first half, let's call it, the way that you wanted to, stifling their offense, being able to move your offense. Yes, it was a couple of field goals to begin with, but then they started to pick up speed. This was just a game where you started out hot and you let it slip away from you, much like they did towards the end of last season a couple of times against the Bengals. This has got to be a premonition that today hurts inside the Chiefs facility.
Yeah, and you also look at the fact that you talk about the field goals early on, and I tweeted about that during the game. But the other part of it to me is, you're in a situation where you're playing against one of the best defenses in the NFL. I believe Denver was the number 2 scoring defense in the NFL, and Kansas City was able to put 27 points up on them. And you feel pretty good about that, except for the fact that they had 20 of those points in the first half and only got 7 in the second.
Yeah, it's difficult. When you take a look at how they got there, obviously it was a big day from Jerick McKinnon in the passing game, and good for him because there wasn't a whole lot else to shout about. I mean, Travis Kelce with 71 yards, underperformance for Travis, even against this defense. And obviously Juju Smith-Schuster was just a couple yards ahead of him, did get that touchdown catch, but not quite what you thought was going to be the rhythm there. Now, originally I thought that was going to be because they wanted to come out and really focus on the rushing attack. We talked last night live post game. If you guys missed that, go back and check that out. But we all kind of felt that the rushing attack was there with Pacheco. We felt that he ran hard. What did he end up with? 2.77 yards after contact per carry. And that's the key takeaway for me is, yes, he got 70 yards at 5.4 a carry, but he was doing a lot of that work, more so than I thought live, on his own after contact. Does that bother you?
Bothers me a little bit, and I think the biggest reason it bothers me is because they're not using it enough at different times. And honestly, I think we've talked about this at times. Andy Reid is going to be a passing offensive coordinator. He's going to go that direction, and Bieniemy is definitely going that direction as well. And I get it to an extent. And the one thing I will say, the one caveat I will say is I wish that they would have probably maybe go back to some of those easier throws that Mahomes was making early in the game, right after he was throwing those picks, because I think you started getting in situations where he tried to feel like he could force it and get away with it. I think that's a problem. But Pacheco was running and running well. McKinnon was running and running pretty well, and they didn't even use Ronald Jones in this game. So a lot of questions as to how effective the running game can be for you if you continue to go away from it at times when it is working.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing is find what works and hammer that until it doesn't work. And when you take a look at the blocking, it really comes to fruition, like the difference that this was. Joe Thuney was immeasurable, in my opinion. 68 snaps, all of the offense, same for Orlando Brown, same for Wiley, Trey Smith, and Creed Humphrey. All 5-year starters played the entire game. But the blocking efficiency was completely different on the left-hand side to the right-hand side. And the presence of Joe Thuney, I think, lifted Orlando Brown. He was going against Baron Browning a lot during the day, and that's a guy who's gotten some decent sacks on some very quality tackles, yet Orlando had maybe his best game of the season in terms of only allowing 1 pressure. Joe Thuney gave up 0. So like the left side immediately solidified as soon as Tooney was back in the lineup.
Yeah, and that is a problem for Kansas City just because if they are going to lose Tooney for any length of time, again, with an injury, that causes a severe problem with Orlando Brown. And the production by Orlando Brown goes way down, and that's something that you can't have. He's already been struggling this season. We know that. They're going to have a very difficult decision as to what they're going to do and have to do with him in the offseason, because the reality is that more than likely there isn't going to be a starting left tackle that is going to be available for free agency. And even if there was, the price is going to be exorbitant, and drafting one is going to be hard as well.
Yeah, it definitely was. And that goes to show what the offseason is going to have to contain again. But in this particular game, we come back to the fact that Orlando played well. Joe played well. Browning did get 4 pressures on the day. He was tied for the lead with rookie Nick Benito, who spelled him on the right-hand side of the defense, as well as Draymond Jones. We saw what happened to him. It was the right-hand side that had some struggles. Now, Trey had a couple of nice blocks. He also gave up some pressures, as did Wiley. We all know the story of Wiley. The fact that it was only 1 tackle yesterday, I think, at least is progression. Maybe that's just that lineup. Maybe it's a length issue. You could certainly make that argument for definitely Browning, but maybe Benito as well. So there's a lot to go in there, but getting half your offensive line to be efficient in the pass game is really a step forward for this group, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a step forward, but I think the other big problem is they're going to have to address the right tackle position. There's no if, ands, or buts. They've got to do something different next year. I don't know what that's going to be. There's going to be a lot of time to dissect this roster and figure out where they're going to have money and where they're not going to have money and how they can do different things. But they have to get somebody at that right tackle position, because I honestly think in some ways, as you were talking about Joe Tooney making Orlando Brown better, I think that Andrew Wiley makes Trey Smith worse.
That's a good way to put it,
because he's always having to worry about his outside shoulder.
And that goes a long way. We'll see if we get any kind of inkling on Lucas Niang. We got to talk about the rest of the defense as well, because there's some hidden gems in there. I things that may pay off here towards the end of the regular season, certainly in the playoffs. We'll get to that on the backside of this.
BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football to college bowl season to basketball and the World Cup. We've got it all covered at BetOnline.net. If you love sports podcasts, you can even find those at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. Head to the website today to use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts.
As we look at where this defense was, it's been struggling of late, and we all know that. The question is, which group is going to show up which day? And really, it comes down to a couple of aspects. The linebackers played well in this game, I think we would all say, from the watch. In the areas that hurt it the most, we take a look at what Russ Wilson did and who he targeted. And I find this really interesting because he targeted Willie Gay the most, and he was 8 for 8 against Gay, but only for 54 yards. So Willie was in coverage. He was getting things done. He was making quick tackles after completions, right? He went at Trent McDuffie a total of 7 times, only got 3 completions out of it. Yes, he did get a call that we're unable to change at this point. You know, there's not much we can do about that, but so maybe you call that a 4th win, but that's, just barely over 50%. He's 50% against L'Jarius Sneed. So overall, it felt like there were obviously problems, but there's also a lot to like in the pass game as well. I think Nick Bolton was next there. No, he only got targeted twice. It was Juan Thornhill who only gave up 3, and again, only 20 yards. So in terms of limiting what those passes did, other than Jerry Jeudy getting loose a couple of times, that was a pretty stout effort overall, and I think should have been enough to win this ball game. Do you still feel that way?
I look at this, and to me, it's a double-edged sword, because with the passing, with the receivers that the Broncos had, they shouldn't have had the success that they had. That is really what my bigger problem is. Kansas City's defense should have been able to play better than they were with the threats that the Broncos were giving them. And I know we didn't talk about this yesterday, but I just have to say this. I cannot believe Jerry Jeudy actually played that game after what he did to the referee, and I'm very curious to see how that ends up.
Yeah,
Because I would imagine he's going to get suspended.
that's a hefty fine at the very, very least. So I am interested to see that as well. What they didn't do, and the thing that I come away feeling good about it, is despite attacking the linebacker level, Dulcich didn't run away from him. He's a guy who's been hurting defenses and really gaining a lot of momentum. The fact that what happened yesterday was on a couple of rookies in particular. All three rookies had some issues, right? But it's just the level. The thing that I still find problematic is they took Jerry Jeudy, a guy who has been struggling through a lot of the season, with a quarterback that's struggling even mightily, and they made them look like an all-pro pair. And that's what can't happen. And I can't put my finger on why, but even though the numbers don't add up to a gargantuan kind of output, it was enough that elevation in particular is what they have to get to the bottom of this week.
Yeah, and I think really the bigger aspect of this for me is the timing of it, and the momentum shift that happened when Mahomes threw that first pick, and how it just snowballed into 21 points for the Broncos in three drives. You can't be in a situation where you're allowing a team that doesn't score more than 23 points all season score 28 against you. You cannot be in that position as a defense. And really, if you look at how they played the first couple of times, the first couple of series, they were fine. They were doing very well. They were slowing things down. They were getting the stops that you need. I mean, maybe they gave up a first down here or there, but who cares about that? That's going to happen. It's an NFL offense. It's when you get the momentum shift, and then all of a sudden the Broncos reel off 21 points in three straight drives on an offense that has no business reeling off that kind of production. And really, I will throw out the screen, because to me, I understand that that's living with Spagnuolo. He's going to do some things, and they called a beautiful play to attack exactly what he was trying to call in that scenario, and it burned him. It's going to happen at times, but it's the other two touchdowns that really bothered me.
Yeah, I can understand that completely. And honestly, that play in particular was kind of a cluster of events that set forth that happening when L'Jarius Sneed nearly makes a tackle and gets stiff armed off of it, but on the way goes down and takes out Juan Thorne, who was the next defender closest to him. Like a couple of things had to happen for that play to actually come to fruition. So it's always good to be lucky, right? I'll take that more than good every day, but I think you can take some takeaways, but certainly things have to get locked down. And we have to talk about where the quarterback is in all this. We're going to do that on the backside of this, because today, thanks to our friends at PrizePicks for bringing you this episode, they have a unique take on daily fantasy sports that you guys want to check out. Right now, the line on Patrick for next week's game against the Houston Texans is at 290.5. So all you have to do is sign up for PrizePicks. You can get it in any app store. You can go to prizepicks.com and get it there. And then you go in and you take a couple of players. You choose whether they're going to go more than that line or less than that line. Super, super simple. You might want to even check out Desmond Ridder is set to make his first start for the Atlanta Falcons. That's another one we're looking at. His line is 172.5. I'm going to take the more on that. I'm just going to tell you, you string 2 to 5 of those together and you have an entry. You can play any major sport that you want. It's quick, it's fast, it's safe, and you can do it in 30 states or Canada. And again, you go to prizepicks.com and you use our code locked on, and you get 100% bonus on top of what you deposit. So you put in $10, you get $10. You put in 100, you get 100. 100 is the limit. So if you put in 1,000, you still only get 100. But check it out with Locked On. That's the code at prizepicks.com. Like you said in the last segment, and we left this for a bit because it's just, again, can't overreact, because it's a rare game where Patrick does this kind of throwing things around the yard to the opposite team. But it is something that we have to get a handle on, and the team has to get a handle on. I still feel like this was a discipline issue. Upon rewatching these plays, I do feel like both the ones to Jewel, I think, were ones where you didn't have to squeeze the ball into those gaps. You could have taken it and lived to play another down. It wasn't worth the effort for the result that you got. And you could have that result potentially on every play. I just think it's about the decision-making process.
I would agree with that, but I would also say that it was a hell of a job by Jewel I think he set Mahomes up on the first one, and he may have even set him up on the second one. He faked like he was going with the guy and stepped right back into the throwing lane. And that's something Mahomes has to learn from, and he'll get better. And I have no doubt that he'll get better from that. But I think Jules set him up on the first one, and maybe even the second. You're absolutely right, though. He didn't have to make those throws. He did not have to try to force it. And as far as the one to Surtain, it's really hard for me to really say much about that interception. I mean, yeah, it was bad. Probably shouldn't have done it, but it sure looked like he was trying to clock it into the ground and not necessarily get it to Sky Moore, but probably should have thrown it elsewhere.
Heck of a play on Surtain's part.
Exactly.
It would have been Kansas City, to tell you the truth. So, best laid plans and all that. But how do they turn it around? And how do you get more guys involved? Because it can't be the Juju and Kelsey show like we talked about last night post-game with Matt. You want to check that out if you missed it. But it is about Sky Moore, in my opinion. When they get McCole and Kadarius back, okay, do that. But Sky's there right now. And he's shown that on the offensive side of the ball, not returning kicks, but on the offensive side of the ball, that he can make things happen. I think there needs to be a small package put in for him as much as anybody else, because he's the odd man out right now. Nobody's paying attention to Sky Moore. No one's going to pay attention to Sky Moore for right now.
Well,
maybe in the postseason. And
Noah Gray, I think, is doing a good job as well. And we haven't even seen Jody Fortson really be involved in the offense that much this year, which is kind of surprising to me. Mm-hmm. But, at the same time, you look at it, you're right. It can be Travis Kelce and Juju. I mean, that's basically you're in a situation, and I know Juju's not Tyreek Hill, but basically you're in the same situation you were in last year in a little bit of a way. It's Kelce and Hill last year. It's Kelce and Juju this year. And you cannot be that two-dimensional, I guess you want to put it, if you want to be a successful offense. And I do think that we are taking a little bit for granted how much McCole Hardman and Kadarius Toney can change this offense, because their ability to get in space and make space plays is going to be huge in the red zone, which I think is where they have struggled the most since both of those guys have been out. And I agree with you. I think they need to get Sky Moore involved more. But Justin Watson has shown that he can do things on this offense. The one thing I will say about Patrick, and I never have to worry about Mahomes and where his mindset is, he came out after that game and put it all on himself. And that is exactly what you expect from your leader. That is exactly what you expect from your QB, is to come out and say, Zach Wilson, pay attention. This is exactly what you say. Mm-hmm. This is exactly the type of thing you do. You take responsibility for how you played, and he did that at the end of the game. And all of his teammates are behind him, and we know they're all behind him. And people are saying, we're right behind you, 15. And I also love what I saw from Frank Clark. Frank Clark came out and said that they didn't play a great game. He said that they're going to get better, and I understand people don't like Frank Clark, but my point is these players are starting to look at it and say, this is not acceptable. And if you get that attitude going into the last 4 games and going into the postseason, you're going to be in much better shape.
Yeah, you have to be, because quite frankly, it's getting to the point now, you shouldn't have to be making these statements. You should be past this. We're talking about 3 veterans the last 2 weeks that have had to come out and say, we were going to play better. Well, prove it. For all you fans out there in Missouri on that side of the line, show me that you can get past this, because Travis Kelce 1 week, Patrick and Frank the next week, I don't want to hear it anymore. I need to see it on the field. No more of this giveaway ball. No more of letting things slip through your fingers. They have to solidify it, and it has to start right now. It's easy, or easier anyway, against the Houston Texans, who did give the Cowboys a good run for their money yesterday. So it's not a laydown game. And quite frankly, this team can't afford to consider anybody a laydown game at this point. This is playoff seeding on the line. You hope that something falters in Buffalo like it did in Miami against the Chargers. Yes, folks, they're very close to sealing up the AFC West title. It just didn't happen last night, but hey, it's coming.
And I'm actually happy it didn't, to be quite honest with you. Yeah, okay. Because I want Miami having that loss.
Fair enough. Okay.
Because I got to root for Miami this week, because they're the one team that I think that, well, not one team. I think that the Bengals have maybe an opportunity to knock off the Bills in a couple of weeks, but Miami playing the Bills this week in Buffalo is going to be possibly for the number 1 seed in the playoffs between Buffalo and Kansas City at this point.
Yeah, it certainly will have an effect one way or the other. Got to hold serve. And Patrick and the group have to become more accountable, as is the defense. This is not letting the defense off the hook. Obviously, we spent a lot of time today talking about the defense, but when you have QB1 in this league on your roster, at some point, it's time to put it away, pack it in, and you just got to take care of business.
And I agree with that 100%, but QB1 is also part of the reason why they were in the situation they were in last night or yesterday. So he's got to take – I'm glad he's taking responsibility for it. He's got to play better, and I think he's going to play better moving forward. But that was also partially on him. And Andy Reid even kind of hinted at it after the game, saying, on his little speech to the team afterwards, saying, he felt like Patrick was just trying to see how good the defense was. A little bit of a jab there, but Patrick and him are, I'm sure, on good terms, and looked like Patrick was laughing. So there you go.
Yeah, Coach Reid today said that he didn't. I don't know how he put it. I have to go back and rewatch it, but basically, Patrick shouldn't be throwing passes like he did in the commercial. That little whip around like that. That's not how you do things anymore. Amazing that that's one of the good throws in this ball game, and that I think says a lot.
Yeah, and for as bad as those interceptions were, his play to Juju in that play specifically that you were just talking about, the underhand throw, good luck finding another QB that's going to do that in the NFL. Because he ran around for,
and hit it.
Yeah. It was ridiculous. Both of them were ridiculous.
I need less ridiculous and more taking care of business is what I need. So we're going to regroup tomorrow. We're going to see who's back. Luckily, the Chiefs had no injuries to report. That can continue today, as I understand. So hopefully they can continue that, get some more guys back, and maybe the total back in the locker room, all pulling in one direction, is going to have an output that makes these games that shouldn't be that close start to actually look the way that they should. We're going to cover that and everything else all week. Don't miss it. I promise you. Any final thoughts from this game? Because I'm ready to move on and look forward.
Honestly, Kansas City won. They're 10-3. I know it wasn't pretty. I know that there's lots of things that you want to clean up and you don't want to play that bad against a bad team like the Broncos, but it is a divisional game. And they got the victory, and they got the victory away from home. So I think that they're going to be in good shape. I mean, 10-3, if you had told me they were 10-3 at this point, when the season started, I would have been pretty happy. I still wouldn't be happy about the losses that they had because I think they gave the game away with obviously the Colts and the Bengals. And so, it is what it is.
Yeah. Hey, I had them right here at this point anyway. So they're on track. Just got to make it a little bit cleaner. We're going to get to that and all the details with Matt Derrick tomorrow. We'll start looking at the Texans game as well and give you our rundown, everything you need to know about that matchup for Friday. Do not miss that. Thank you for spending your time with us today. Check out another show, maybe the Locked On Sports Today show. You want to check that out because it's every major story from every major sport all in one podcast. You can get that anywhere that you get your podcast. So check them out as well. A couple of changes going on in Locked On Draft Show. That's starting to pick up as we get into the end of the season for some teams. So check us out over there. You'll find me and Eric Crocker. Thanks for spending your time with us today. We'll talk to you tomorrow.